A lot of times when I went into, boardrooms or pitch competitions, the audience or the people that are the decision makers don't look like me. So they might not understand where I'm coming from. The only person that knows your story that well is you. And you have to do your research and your confidence to stand your ground.
This is where it all begins. So say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring innovators, disruptors, and creators who are breaking through the status quo to change the way business happens today. Hi, my name is Tyler. I'm here with my co-host, Michael Johnson. We're from Slam Agency, and we are in beautiful Miami, Florida at the CIC building in Wynwood. And we are at Venture Cafe. Venture Cafe is the largest Thursday gathering of innovators, which are people who are making things happen. And I'm super excited because tonight we are with Jennifer Pierre of Melanites.
So over the years, Jennifer has mentored, tutored, and volunteered with countless children. She's seen firsthand how differently boys of color have maneuvered through life, and it put into perspective how society cultivates children based on race and gender. She created Melanites to intercept the glass ceiling placed on young boys' minds about what they can be when they grow up and how they're supposed to express themselves. Her goal is simple: to design diverse toys, storybooks, and games that empower children to dream big. Well, Jennifer, I'm really happy to have you.
No, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited.
And for those of you that can't see, Jennifer's brought something with her today. And why don't you tell us about what you brought?
Yes. I brought along Jalen, and he is one of our first characters under Melanites. He's Jalen the Thinker. He's 9 years old, and he's part of our whole Melanites crew. We also have Aiden, Sid, and Marcus, and it's really just about celebrating brown boyhood and giving stories and positive representation.
Now, as I look at him sitting here, he's not like this, like overly masculine, big muscle, like the toys you see in the toy aisle.
No, not at all. And that's definitely designed on purpose. Jalen is someone that a little boy can look into an aisle and see himself in, whether he likes science, whether he likes to go outside and play baseball. It's really just about looking at a character and connecting with their story. And so that's why I designed him to be playful, to be, smiling, to be approachable, etc.
So I'm super excited to have you on the show because one of my passions, one of the things that get me up in the morning is trying to help people realize and reach their highest potential, like that best self.
Yes.
And a lot of times that starts with understanding who we are as people.
Definitely.
So talk to me about how characters like Jalen help children understand who they are.
Sure. So for me, when I was sitting down and thinking about Melanites and what type of company I wanted to be, it really had to stem from why I got started. And so Melanites stemmed from my time at the South Miami Community Center, where I volunteered and mentored a lot of kids of color. And a lot of the times I would ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And their answers would center around being an athlete or a rapper. And there's nothing wrong with those professions at all. But because they didn't see other people that looked like them in different fields, they never could imagine it behind that scope. And so for me, when I developed my characters, I did it on purpose where they weren't doctors, they weren't lawyers, but it was themes like thinker, maker, doer, and performer. So Jalen, he's a 9-year-old boy. He loves baseball. He's a thinker. He always likes to solve problems. I really wanted to develop that story and that positive representation so a young kid could see him and be like, wow, that reminds me of me.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm just curious, as you're kind of developing the story around a character, obviously these stories have an inspiration somewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe even based on a real person or a combination of some real person. So where does all that come from?
Definitely from the kids I interact with. They're based on all those experiences, all those stories that I've heard over the years. And that's really why, I developed different characters and more to come for sure. But I really wanted to give a wide scope so that different boys could look at it and say, that reminds me of myself. And then I wanted to make it mixed. So you might not look like Jalen, but you might think that you're a thinker and you can connect with that as well. So I wanted it to have different points.
So when you say children of color or brown boyhood, explain for the national audience, what does that represent?
So for me, I did on purpose not to say black boyhood, but brown boyhood, because I wanted to encompass different diasporas. So if we have Jalen, who's African American, we have Marcus, who's Caribbean American, Sid, who's Indian American, Aiden, who's biracial. I wanted different young boys of color to identify with Melanites in their way.
That's cool.
And obviously the name Melanite. You can explain that. It seems obvious, but if you could explain that as well.
Sure, of course. So Melanites is stemmed from the word melanin, and it's really just a celebration of different backgrounds, different colors, all the ethnicities, and a celebration of that.
So obviously this is based on like identity and stories that people are telling themselves. So
Yeah.
where are you pulling that inspiration for those stories?
So I guess I pull it from interactions and people around me, from friends, from family members, from even my own younger brother. Because like in our household, he was allowed to be multidimensional. For instance, like he loves to write. He can sit there and write stories upon stories, but he's also really good at basketball. And so it was never told to him, oh, you have to choose one or the other. He could develop both. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, I make those characters multidimensional. I make them have different points of entry, because I think that in our society, sometimes boys are pigeonholed and they aren't allowed to express themselves because, you know, boys aren't supposed to do this or that. And I really wanted to break those gender barriers as well.
Now, when you first thought of this, it was when you were working with the kids. And okay, so prior to that, like you went to Boston and you came back to Miami. Like, I want to just know a little bit more about that backstory. Was it an aha moment, or was it like gradually over time, like you kept seeing like these things pop up? And
I think it's definitely gradual and over time. Like even for me, when I was a young girl, it was hard for me to go into a Walmart or a Target and find a doll that looked like me. You know, they had green eyes, they had purple hair, they had straight hair, and I'm like, okay, where am I? And so it's definitely working with different nonprofits and after school programs and being around the kids. I decided like, hey, what about the boys? Like there really isn't much for them. If you go into a toy store, you're going to see the action figures, but they're going to have, you know, big muscles. They're going to have guns. It's like this huge hyper masculinity, and there really isn't other options for them to express themselves differently. And I love how in our society, like we're challenging those gender stereotypes, especially for girls. Like we're saying, you can do whatever you want. Go into STEM, do this, do that. And I wanted to have the same opportunity for boys and boys of color.
Wow. So what's like the biggest, like if we think about, like obviously you have commerce challenges, you know, you have to get in the stores, you have to get the word out, you have to get the, you know, the the brand recognition and awareness. But outside of that, like what is the biggest challenge like with getting these in front of people outside of like the commerce things, right?
I think it's definitely been a journey. So 2 years ago when I first had this idea and I was like pitching it to people or walking into a room and telling my story, the reaction is definitely different than today. So back then it's like, you know, dolls for boys, what is that? Who would be interested in purchasing that? Do kids even want that? But we've seen like over the years a definite shift in consumerism. Like you see that American Girl, they just came out with their boy doll, and you go into the stores, like there's a shift in our society that makes it more open. And so now when I walk in, it's a lot more easier to pitch. Like that education factor of convincing people is not as high, and so that's really good for me as well, just being in the space. And another challenge would definitely be, you know, the toy space is hard to get into as well. You know, going and saying, would you like to put this into the store, convincing them that people will want to buy it, and that, you know, consumers that are of color are going to put their dollars to this. And so it's interesting to have these conversations, but it's also a moment of education, so I love it.
and this is the perfect time. As we have seen recently in the last month or so, with the movie Black Panther, there's power, you know, in the African American and brown community
of representation, of course,
of commerce.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like we're waiting to put our money to things that look like this, that inspire us, that represent us in a positive light. And I think it's beautiful that we're breaking down barriers in all types of industries to do so. And
now, you know, finally, we that, you know, the community is being taken seriously.
Yes.
You know, you spend your money with the community, and that's the first step.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about I want to talk, you know, a little bit about the, you know, the toy. It's an interesting, you know, it's not every day you meet somebody that designs toys, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little bit about that process, but then also talk a little bit about, you know, the marketing side and like, you know, some of your ambitions and challenges on that side.
Of course.
But first the fun stuff, designing these things.
Designing is like my absolute favorite part of the whole process because I have a marketing background. So the ability to like build the brand from the ground up and get the color scheme and get the characters and figure out the stories, like that's been my favorite part because, you know, I believe in the power of the pen. I believe in crafting stories really does change people and changes lives. And so that's my favorite part. Designing the toys was definitely a challenge. It took about a year to do so. It's funny because I started off at Babson College with a 3D printed prototype in the lab. And so that was very cool to go through and like combine design and technology too. And so like being able to do that empowers you to like go further. And so like when you're speaking to a manufacturer, you have a better idea of like what you want and what your vision is. And so that was really cool.
That's awesome. And on the marketing side, you said you have a background in marketing. Mm-hmm. So like what's the master plan? Because you're self-funded, so that would be kind of like what we call bootstrapping, right?
Yes, definitely.
and you know, at one point this was a part-time, like you're in graduate school,
yes,
and kind of you're just getting
Finding
your
my
feet
way.
wet, and now like you're all in. So like what's the plan?
So for me right now, like I want to be what Dora the Explorer was to me when I was a kid. So, you know, as a young kid who's African American looking at the screen, Dora the Explorer doesn't look like me, but I connected with her and I remember her and like it's part of my childhood. So I want to create that same experience for young boys of color. I'm starting off with, you know, the toys and the storybooks. I want to go into the digital realm. I want to have animation. I really want to create just a whole world that celebrates that. So that's my vision long term.
That's cool. You know, the American Girl story, I believe they had a tough time getting in stores, which is why they decided to create their own stores, right?
Yeah.
And Build-A-Bear, which is from St. Louis, is where we're from, they had the exact same story.
Gotcha.
The interesting thing about both of those brands is like it's that customer or that like that experience of the brand, right? That experience marketing. So like you walk in and you become part of the story as a child.
Definitely.
Have you ever thought about that?
I have. Like I would love to have my own store where you walk in and you see the different stations and different dolls, and like I want to build off of like themes, like, you know, what is a thinker, and then like create like, you know, different costumes and different things that the kids can wear, and then the action doll can wear as well. So like I really want to have those experiences with the kids as well too. So I think it's great because, you know, that's where it all started, and I love definitely going and having like sessions in the library and like having stories and then doing an activity. Like that's really the why of why I got started, and that's what fuels me. So
that's awesome. You know, you talked a little bit before the show about knowing your why. So you know, like there's people out there that are listening right now that they have a desire, you know, they have like something that they get excited about.
Yeah.
But they're just excited about it right now. They, you know, and they're listening, and they're like you were maybe, you know, 5 years ago.
Right.
What was it that convinced you to say, you know, it's time to make this happen?
Honestly, I got it. Two things. One, it got to the point where it's just so frustrating to see the same problem over and over again. And then the second part was like, why not me? I think entrepreneurship is hard. The journey is hard. Waking up and doing, you know, and overcoming these challenges every day is hard. But at the end of the day, when I have conversations with parents, when I see the look on a child's face when they first see the doll, like those are things that propel me forward and keep me consistent, because I know that it's not just a quote unquote product. It's not just a company. It's experiential. You know, it's people experiencing stories and feelings, and I live for that, because that's what a company should do, and that's what I'm trying to achieve.
That's amazing. So, like in your company information, you talk about the science behind identifying. Talk a little bit about that for people that may not understand how powerful it is to see somebody that's like you.
Yeah, like when you're a kid, you're so impressionable. Like you wait and you go into the stores, you watch the stories and the action figures, and you dress in those costumes, and like you really do experience and put yourself in the shoes of whatever you're looking at. And when you don't see yourself, it's a very alone experience. You start to question, you know, is there something wrong with me? Why can I not achieve this? How come nobody looks like me? And so having these stories there and having them positive and multidimensional is something that's really important. And I think that a lot of times people don't understand, you know, how impressionable it is. Like when I was young, I got to play with dolls. I got to, put myself in the shoes of being a nurturer or being this, and having mentors that say you can do whatever you want when you grow up. And to not be able to have that experience really does lower the ceiling of your abilities. And so that's why, for me, like having the themes of thinker and doer and maker and performer, I really want to inspire kids. Like if you like art and music and all these other things that most people say is not gonna, be quote unquote successful in the future, do it anyways, because you never know what's gonna happen. Cool.
So where does this passion come from? Do you have children?
No, I don't.
So where does the passion come from for children?
I mean, I don't even know. Like, it's just, I've always loved their energy. I've always loved how they really are a blank slate when they're young. They can do anything they want, and they're shaped by society. They're shaped by people who say you can do this or you can't do that. And for me personally, I'm a first generation American. I was born in Haiti, and my parents came over, and so watching them work hard and telling me that I can achieve whatever I want, and having mentors in different aspects of my life push me along the way, that's shaped who I was. And I remember those experiences, and I remember how I feel, and I just want to give that back too. So
that's amazing. When we think about challenges that you've overcome as an early, startup, a bootstrapper, and for people that are in your position right now that are like, what was one of the biggest challenges that you've overcome early on, and then what is something that you're either facing right now or that you're getting ready to face, and how are you preparing for that?
So I think early on, one of my biggest challenges was having the confidence in my venture. So like you mentioned earlier when we were talking, a lot of times you have an idea, you think it's great, but you're afraid to take it out into the world, to say, hey, what do you think of this? Or to pitch it in front of strangers that don't know who you are and say, this is important and here's why. And so for me, I had to overcome that and know that I have a killer company that's going to change lives, and it's going to do this because of X, Y, and Z. And that really comes from within and knowing what your impact is. Because a lot of times when I went into, boardrooms or pitch competitions, the audience or the people that are the decision makers don't look like me. So they might not understand where I'm coming from, who my target market is, why it's important. So the only person that knows your story that well is you. And you have to do your research and your confidence to stand your ground. And that's something that I had to overcome early on. A challenge that I'm facing right now is definitely like being a bootstrap company. I put all the resources and the time and energy into it, and we're coming to a point where I need outside funding or other resources to get me to the next level. Like I have so many visions for the company, and I just need like-minded individuals or organizations to help me reach that level.
So speaking of that, I mean, obviously there's a platform here. Mm-hmm. So like if you're looking for like the perfect partner, and I don't necessarily mean business partner, but like the ideal entity or person or group of people or community that can help you get from point A to point B, like what does that look like?
For me, it has to be that our mission is similar or aligned. They have to understand where the company grew from kids and from stories and from representation, and knowing the importance of that, and changing that into something really cool in the future, something innovative, something that's never been done before. And I think it's a combination of innovation, creativity, and that social nuance is very important for me.
That's awesome. How can people purchase Jalen and the other characters? Is it possible to purchase these right now?
Yes, definitely. So we have an e-commerce site online. It's www.brownboyhood.com, and you can purchase Jalen. We also have a storybook called Jalen and the High Five Machine, and it follows Jalen and the rest of the crew along on his first inventor storyline. And you can also follow us on social media on all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Brown Boyhood.
That's awesome. And you said I could take all this home?
No, definitely.
To avoid the free shipping, you're just handing it off. Well, Jennifer, thank you for being on the show. I mean, this is,
for having me.
I'm inspired. I know that the people listening, if it just makes sense. I can't believe this has not been done, right?
I know,
because
right?
it's like duh, and here you are. So that's why I know it's going to be successful, because not only does it make sense, but it's helping make the world a better, helping people realize and reach their highest potential. I mean,
of course,
it's gold. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, thanks for being here. And love what you're doing. So.
Appreciate it.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we